Tonight on Closer Look, an Innisfil man is trying to piece together a mystery that involves the death of his father, whose remains were found in a charred truck outside of Halifax, Nova Scotia back in January. Chris Simon, the editor of both Innisfil and Brantford Today, joins us tonight with the latest on Brad Dunsmoor and his search for answers. Chris, this story is full of mystery, and we'll get you to walk us through it all, but let's start with Benny's dad, Brad. What can you tell us about him?
Yeah, so first off, thank you so much for having me. I've known Benny for a little bit of time now. As the story talks about, he runs a very well-known haunted mansion in town that he does every Halloween. But his father's roots actually extend back quite a bit. Into Innisfil. He was a pretty well-known baseball coach. He also coached soccer. And so what happened was he was a drywaller, got to retirement age, decided he wanted to step away. And it was always his dream to move to a site on the ocean. So a couple of years ago, he moved out to Nova Scotia with his girlfriend and thought he was going to live out his days, just kind of doing what he wanted out east. And unfortunately, in January, something seems to have happened that took his life.
Okay, let's talk about that, Chris. What do we know? What happened?
Yeah, to be honest, it's a huge mystery. We don't know an awful lot of the details. Police were called in early January, January 8th, and they investigated, but it sounds like the truck had potentially been sitting there for a couple of days at that point. So nobody really knows how it got there, why it got there, because it's a very remote area of the province. And there just are not a lot of details around why this happened or the circumstances that led up to it.
So what are authorities saying, Chris? Have you had any additional communication with the RCMP or the Nova Scotia Medical Examiner Service? Is there any new information on the progress of the investigation?
Not too much more than what we were able to report yesterday. Basically, the remains are still being held at this point, which is the family's biggest concern. Obviously, they want to get to the bottom of why he died and all of that. But I think it is a real sense of consternation right now, and definitely stress that they're not able to get his remains home. So what the RCMP and the medical examiner's service has told me is that basically because the incident is still under investigation, that they're not sure whether there was foul play or not involved at this point. They're keeping those remains basically just in case they need them for further examination. The RCMP is being fairly tight-lipped around the circumstances. Again, they've kind of said they don't know exactly what transpired. And so at this point, they're just kind of going with the standard. This incident is under investigation, and we'll let you know more when we have more information.
I know that Benny and family certainly frustrated by the process in getting Dad home. Any inclination whatsoever, Chris, as to when the family will be able to do just that?
Unfortunately, no. And I've tried to press. I know they have really tried to press because, frankly, you just can't move on, right? It's a big part of the grieving process is being able to go through that element and do whatever you're going to do with the person's remains. They have been told that basically it could be 6 to 8 months, but I was not able to confirm that specific date through the medical examiner's service. They basically just told me that they'll let the next of kin know when they're able to release the remains, and then they'll go from there. But they won't even specifically comment on this situation to me at this point.
Chris, you mentioned in your story Benny's role with the Guildford Haunted Mansion and how it connects to his dad's legacy. Can you tell us more about that, and maybe any particular memories or lessons Benny learned from his dad that shaped his work in the community?
Yeah, I think what Benny just kind of really took away from Brad was a sense of hard work, a sense of, community, and how important that was. Like I mentioned earlier, Brad was big on the local sports scene. He volunteered for 20 years in Innisfil, and before that, when they lived in Toronto, he volunteered down there. Benny said, I'm not cut out to be a head coach. I'm not cut out to be involved in kids' sports. That is just not my thing. But he said, I can learn to give back in other ways, and in ways that I'm passionate about. And so when the idea for the Haunted Mansion came up during the COVID pandemic, his dad was very encouraging about that kind of stuff, and just said, look, you're giving back how you can. The Haunted Mansion does typically donate to the local food bank. And I know that Brad was really proud of Benny for going through that process and working as hard as he did for months out of the year to get the Haunted Mansion right.
I know the family has set up a GoFundMe page to cover various expenses. Chris, how has the community responded to the fundraising effort so far? And has Benny mentioned any support or outreach that has particularly touched the family during this very difficult time?
Yeah, actually, it's really interesting because Benny says basically can't go to work right now without running into someone who wants to talk about his dad, which is, a really interesting part of the grieving process, I'm sure. And but one of the reasons why he wanted to talk so openly with us is because I think he wanted to get the message out there, so that, frankly, he didn't have to repeat the message every day. I think that can get a little bit exhausting for folks. So he says, he's had lots of well wishes. The GoFundMe, I know, has not really picked up the way that they hoped it had. Like, it's been up now for quite a bit, and it when I checked yesterday, it had only raised a few $100s. So they're hoping to obviously get more than that, because it is expensive to travel out there a couple of times, get the paperwork in order that they need to get in order, and to obviously cover funeral costs. Benny's had to take time off work for this process, and will again probably in the near future. So it's just to cover all of those expenses for them.
There's Chris Simon, editor at Innisfil and Bradford Today, on tonight's Closer Look.